What if I told you that the world we live in is actually built upon a great forgetting? What if there was a book so dangerous that for millennia, from Roman emperors to powerful religious leaders, everyone tried everything to erase it from human memory? A book that tells a completely different story about our origins. A story that, if exposed, could shake the foundations of every modern religion and political institution. Today, we are not talking about vague legends. We are reopening the file on an ancient text, which the Egyptians simply called the Great Book. It held knowledge that completely contradicted the established world order. Today, the surviving fragments of it are known by the name the Kolbrin Bible. To understand this secret, we must go back in time. One of the most glorious, yet most tragic places in human history, the Royal Library of Alexandria. We often hear of its destruction as an unfortunate accident, accidental fires, bloodthirsty soldiers. But let's pause for a moment. Let's ask a thornier question. What if it was not an accident? What if it was a deliberate assassination, targeting knowledge itself? Close your eyes and picture that place. Alexandria was not just a warehouse of lifeless scrolls. It was a living, thinking organ, a giant brain of the ancient world, beating with powerful pulses. It was a seething crucible of the greatest ideas. Imagine the cool marble corridors where the abstract mathematics of Pythagoras debated with the precise astronomy of the Babylonians, where the idealistic philosophy of Plato sat right next to the mystical, magical teachings of Egyptian priests. And in that corner, the experimental medicine of Hippocrates being compared with the secret healing arts of the Druids from the far north. There were no borders here. It was where the wisdom of all humanity was gathered under one roof, and lying somewhere, hidden among hundreds of thousands of precious manuscripts, were the scrolls that made up the Great Book. A book that told the history of humanity long before official history began. A book describing a cosmology where the universe was not a divine whim, but a complex, orderly mechanism. A book holding the terrifying memory of cycles of great destruction and the rebirth of civilizations from the ashes. And then, in a blink of history, it all vanished. Tens of thousands of scrolls turned into black smoke and ash. Official history, like a guilty schoolboy trying to make excuses, mutters inconsistent explanations. First, they blame Julius Caesar. Then, they talk about the Roman Emperor Aurelian. Then, another legend emerges about fanatical Christians smashing temples. And finally, to cover the tracks completely, they add a story about Arabs burning books to heat their baths. Look closely at this picture. 4 different culprits, spread out over nearly 1,000 years. This isn't history. This is a smokescreen. It is a classic tactic. Create too many suspects so the real culprit can slip into the shadows. When a crime has too many suspects, the basic rule of investigation is to find the one with the strongest motive. The motive here is not gold or land. It is an ideological motive. Who was most threatened by a library where one question could have hundreds of different answers? The answer is clear. It was the one who brought to the world a single answer. A new power was rising that could not tolerate competition. It did not need Plato's dialogues on the multidimensional nature of the soul. It did not need Egyptian texts speaking of gods in the plural. And above all, it did not need a history older than itself. All this wisdom was declared heresy, poison for the mind, and the best antidote for this disease was fire. The library was not just a storage for books, it was a symbol of the diverse old world. To build a new world, that symbol had to be destroyed. But this fire did not start with torches. It started in the minds of desperate men. To understand this ruthlessness, we need to look at the dilemma of the early believers. They brought to the world a story of a Savior born of a virgin who suffered death and was resurrected. But when they shared this with the Greek or Egyptian intellectuals, they received only indifferent shrugs. Why? Because these stories were painfully familiar. The ancient world was saturated with similar myths. For millennia, the Egyptians had worshipped Horus, son of the virgin Isis. The Phrygians told of Attis, born of the virgin Nana. The Greeks had Perseus, and especially the Roman cult of Mithras, a god born from a rock, witnessed by shepherds who had a Last Supper and ascended to heaven. These similarities were not just superficial, they were structurally deep, and this created an existential crisis for the new faith. How can you prove you are the only truth if your central story looks exactly like a copy of old pagan myths? This is where Justin Martyr, one of the first Christian apologists, entered the stage of history with an argument that was brilliant, but also incredibly terrifying. In his writings, he did not deny the similarities. On the contrary, he admitted them frankly. He wrote, "When we say that Jesus Christ was produced without sexual union, was crucified and rose again, we propound nothing different from what you believe regarding those whom you esteem sons of Jupiter." Was that an admission of defeat? Not at all. Justin delivered the knockout blow. He explained that all those similarities were the work of the devil. According to his logic, the devil, with his cunning and ability to foresee the future, knew the Savior would come. So, he went ahead thousands of years and planted these counterfeit stories in the pagan world. He created Horus, Mithras, Perseus to scramble the signal, so that when the truth appeared, people would be confused and unable to tell the real from the devil's fake. Reflect on the destructive power of that statement in just one move. The entire spiritual, cultural, and historical treasury of ancient humanity was turned into plagiarism from hell. The scrolls in the Library of Alexandria were no longer cultural heritage. They became the enemy's weapons, traps designed to tempt the soul. And what do you do with enemy weapons? You destroy them. Burning books now became a holy act, a cleansing of the world from lies. It was a license for intellectual genocide. They thought the fire had consumed everything. They believed the ash had buried the dangerous ideas. But they were wrong. The most valuable things are always hidden the best. While the greatest library in the world writhed in flames, a silent rescue operation was underway. Those who understood the true value of the great book, perhaps the last Egyptian priests or brave librarians, ran into the danger. They knew they were saving not just paper and ink, but the key to understanding the past and the future. The surviving fragments of the book began a secret journey lasting millennia. Some copies went east, hiding in Indian temples, but the main body of the text traveled north, through secret trails, into a Europe that was slowly sinking into the Dark Ages. The strangest thing about its survival is not its journey, but the people who protected it. It was not entrusted to kings, powerful bishops, or noble secret orders. Instead, its guardians were the invisible people of history: farmers, blacksmiths, carpenters, simple village elders. Why them? Modern researchers claim this was a choice of deep wisdom. The knowledge in the great book was too powerful. If it fell into the hands of those in power, the temptation to use it to manipulate the masses would be too great. The text would be twisted for political gain. But a common man, whose life is tied to the land and labor, sees the book differently. To them, it is not a tool of rule, but a source of wisdom to understand the world and to live in harmony with the cosmos. They were pure guardians, not masters looking to exploit it. And so, in absolute silence, the book was passed from hand to hand for hundreds of years. By the 12th century, the book found refuge at Glastonbury Abbey in England, a land steeped in legends of King Arthur, the Holy Grail, and Druidic magic. Here, the ancient Egyptian manuscripts met and merged with Celtic wisdom. This is when the Kolbrin Bible took shape, half Egyptian majesty, half northern mystery. But history has a habit of repeating itself cruelly. In 1184, a terrible fire broke out at Glastonbury. An accident? Or was it the hand of those who wanted to erase forbidden knowledge? We will never know. And once again, the guardians rushed into the fire. They did not save gold or jewels. They saved a massive scroll, heavily charred at the edges, to ensure its safety forever. They painstakingly transcribed part of the text onto thin bronze plates. That is why the Kolbrin is also called the Bronze Book. From that moment, the book retreated completely into the shadows, waiting for the time when humanity would be mature enough to read it. So, what is the content of this book that made it the target of oppression for 2,000 years? When you open the first pages, you understand immediately. It does not lull you with comforting fairy tales. It challenges your reality. The very first line, the Kolbrin declares, "On earth there is no true beginning, for here everything is an effect, and the ultimate cause is elsewhere. Stop and reflect. Everything we see, birth, aging, sickness, death, are just ripples on the water. The stone thrown into the pond lies in another dimension." The Kolbrin takes us back to the time before the beginning. There is no image of an old man with a white beard sitting on a throne with human emotions. There is only the void, but it is not a dead emptiness. It is a void filled with potential. There exists an eternal unified consciousness, an impersonal spirit, alone in the deep silence. The book offers a definition of time so beautiful it is shocking. Time had not yet slept in the bosom of God, for there was no change, and change is time. This is a modern scientific concept. Time is not an independent entity. It is born the very moment consciousness performs the first action. When there is motion, there is before and after, and time is born. And how was the universe born? Not by molding clay, but by the congealment of thought. The universe is God's thought turned into matter. But here's the Kolbrin's greatest paradox. By creating the world, the Creator veiled himself. The universe is a grand game of hide and seek. The Creator dissolves into his work. Like a painter merging into the painting, he is present in every grain of sand, every ray of light, and he is invisible. The purpose of man, therefore, is not passive worship, but to become an explorer, to look through the veil of matter and find our own origin. But where does man come from? Forget the peaceful Garden of Eden. Forget the innocence. The Kolbrin Bible paints a picture of human origins that is brutal and far more realistic. The book says the earth was prepared, like a giant workshop, and then the first human-like creatures emerged from mud eggs in the coastal swamps. But they were just animals. They lacked the spark. They had no capacity for awareness. For true man to be born, A great shock was needed, a global cataclysm. The Kolbrin calls it the Great Day, the day the Spirit entered the beast. The earth reacted to this unnatural union with extreme pain. The book writes, "The earth writhed, she wept in her rivers and shrieked in her storms. She brought forth man in anguish." Man is not the child of comfort. We are heirs of sorrow and students of suffering. Suffering is not a punishment. Suffering is our nature. We were born in the storm to learn how to master the storm. And in that moment of chaos, the Creator did something miraculous. He opened the great eye within man, the third eye of the Spirit. In an eternal instant, man saw everything. He saw the past, the future unrolling like a scroll. He saw himself as part of God. The boundary between I and the universe vanished. In that moment, man was divine. But then, the curtain closed. The light went out. Man woke up in the desolate, cold material world. All that remained was a vague memory, a nameless longing, no more than the shadow of a dream. Kolbrin explains that this is the source of our eternal dissatisfaction. Why do we always feel something is missing? Why do we look at the stars with teary eyes? Because we are remembering that moment. We are looking for what we once saw, but have forgotten. It is a curse, but also humanity's greatest driving force. If all the above is philosophy, then what comes next is a warning written in blood. This is the real reason the Kolbrin was hunted down. The book declares a chilling truth. From ancient times, there has been knowledge that there was not one creation, but two. The earth was once utterly destroyed, and then reborn. All our history is just chapter 2. There was a first creation, and it was wiped clean, not by random nature, but by a controlled destruction. The executioner is named by the Kolbrin, the destroyer. The book describes, in the great destruction, God caused a dragon from the heavens to come and encompass the earth. Do not be mistaken. This is not a fairy tale dragon. The description resembles a terrifying astronomical event, a giant celestial body, a rogue planet, glowing red, roaring like 1,000 beasts. When it passed by Earth, its gravitational pull tore the atmosphere, boiled the oceans, and cracked the Earth's crust. It passed by, wiping the slate clean, and vanished into the darkness of space, leaving behind a small group of survivors to start over. In the Stone Age, with memories of a golden age remaining only as myths. The most haunting question the Kolbrin asks us today is, will the destroyer turn? And is our glittering civilization merely a second experimental attempt, waiting for its own day of judgment? The Kolbrin Bible might be fact, It might be legend, but its value lies in its reminder. It reminds us that humans are small, yet also infinitely great, that history is not a safe straight line, but a turbulent circle. The nameless guardians kept these pages not to scare us, but to prepare us, to make us remember who we are. Because only when we know where we come from can we choose where we are going. Perhaps it is time we stop burning books and start actually reading them.